A very warm good morning, good afternoon to one and all who joined virtually through Zoom and Facebook platform for the second day of a national webinar series on Consumer Protection Act 2019 Rules and Regulations Technical Session uh, 1. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all on behalf of Chair on Consumer Law and Practice, National Law School of India, University, Bangalore. Today, we have two eminent guest speakers with us, Ms. Nidhi Khare, Chief Commissioner, Central Consumer Protection Authority, and the Additional Secretary, Ministry of Consumer Affairs, Food and Public Distribution, Government of India, New Delhi, and Mr. Vagish Kumar Singh, alumni of NLSIO, Advocate, Supreme Court of India, and Managing Partner, Capstone Legal, Jaipur. Now, I request Professor Ashok R. Patil to welcome and introduce the today's guest speaker. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Akshay. Today is the first technical session. Yesterday, our webinar series inaugurated by Justice R.K. Agarwal, President of National Consumer Commission, and another chief guest was our Secretary, Miss Leena Nandan, Secretary of Ministry of Consumer Affairs, Government of India. Both of them spoke on the new legislation, Consumer Protection Act 2019. And also our secretary open for suggestions. If you, while doing these technical sessions, if any valuable suggestions are there, we can take those suggestions and we'll forward it to them. So today is first technical session on Central Consumer Protection Authority. Again, this was thought of bringing this central authority during 2010-11 time, when we wanted to amend Consumer Protection Act 1986. During that time, there was no plan to come out with a in new legislation. During that time, the amendment to the existed 1986 Act. So during that time, the regulatory authority we discussed, and while discussion, we take up the US Federal Trade Commission and other regulatory authorities, and also the regulatory authorities which are in India. So the Competition Commission or IRDAI or many other the regulatory authorities we looked into. So on all those things, so we discussed then, and later, as you know, it was happened during Congress government time. Later, the new government came and looking into the amendments to the all the sections, they thought of new legislation itself. So we have already discussed on this in the first day, that how the process has happened for this particular Consumer Protection Act 2019. Today we have two guest speakers. One is Nidhi Khare, Additional Secretary, Minister of Consumer Affairs, Government of India. And now she has taken a charge of Chief Commissioner of Central Consumer Protection Authority. Let me introduce her. She will join within a few minutes. So let me introduce her. Ms. Nidhi Khare is IAS officer of 1992, batch from Jharkhand cadre, born in Jammu on 12th February 1968. She completed her studies from Dehradun and Lucknow, doing her master's in biochemistry. She has served as a district collector in Madhubani, Jamshedpur, and Dumka. Her experience in Government of India since 2008 to 2015, and then 2018 to as on now. Presently, she is a additional secretary in Department of Consumer Affairs. She was made the first chief commissioner of Central Consumer Protection Authority. She has been instrumental in bringing out all the rules and regulations under the Consumer Protection Act 2019 and amendment to EC Act also. Also, look after price stabilization of 22 commodities that include pulses, onions, etc. She has served as a joint secretary in Minister of MHA, Ministry of Environment, Forestry, and Climate Change, and Ministry of Expenditure. As a JS, she was instrumental in conceptualizing and implementing the nationally acclaimed program of direct benefit transfers, wherein subsidies for LPG and entitlements such as scholarships, pensions, and wages under Manrega started reaching millions of beneficiaries seamlessly without the middleman into their bank account. This has saved the nation about rupees 65,000 crores annually. She was an advisor, planning commission, looking administration. She was a director, social justice, empowerment, looking after disability division. And her experience in state governments as a secretary, commercial taxes, 2015 to 2016, she tried to bring easy to the dealers by simplifying taxation and curbing evasion of tax through the use of business intelligence. She worked briefly for GST. As a principal secretary, personal administrative reforms, Rajya Bhasha 2016 to 2018. She was instrumental in making domicile policy for the state, which has led to recruitment in 1 lakh posts, which were earlier pending due to lack of policy formulation. She was instrumental to providing 2% horizontal reservation to primitive tribes to ensure their empowerment, a rare feat to happen anywhere in the country for primitive tribals. As a principal secretary and health and medical education, she has been able to successfully implement the Gram Swaraj Abhiyan for Mission Indradhanush. Rota vaccine has been introduced, countrywide launching Ayushman Bharat got started under her leadership from Jharkhand. Niti Aayog has appreciated Jharkhand for fastest growth in health sector. With this brief introduction, I welcome Ms. Nidhi Khare for this first technical session, ma'am. Welcome to you, ma'am.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Really pleasure to connect with all of the participants. And thank you so much for being very generous and introducing me to the delegates. I really thank the chair because basically the CP Act has just been amended, and CCPA, which is for the first time an authority, has been set up. And this is basically to look after the interests of consumers and basically safeguard as a class action. Yesterday, when Secretary in her inaugural speech also, she must have laid down, emphasis and must have outlined the issues that have been concerning the consumers in general, and how, as a nation, we are going to tackle this issue. So I really thank you. And before I begin, I would also like to say that I have prepared a small, it's a small presentation on what CCPA would be doing. So can I share the screen and then start?
Yes, ma'am. Hello. Share PPT for her. She can share PPT. Yes, ma'am. Just check it, ma'am. Share
Yes.
PPT.
Has it been shared?
Ma'am, you have to share, ma'am. Sharing is
Acha,
allowed there.
just a second. Just a second.
There's a down share screen.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, coming, ma'am. Yeah. Okay.
All right. So I'm going to be very brief with my presentation on Central Consumer Protection Authority. And just to introduce the subject, um, we've been experiencing a great change because of the digital age, which has ushered into new kind of commerce. The global market has changed. Uh, Convenient payment mechanisms have arisen all through the across the world. A large variety of choices has become easy for the consumers, and there is also improved services and shopping as per convenience. And this has also given now new set of challenges for safeguarding of consumer rights. To address these challenges, the Parliament had passed a landmark consumer protection bill on the 6th of August, and it was published in the official gazette on the 9th August. And by doing this, it has replaced the 3 decades old Consumer Protection Act 1986. Consumer Protection Act came into force on 20th July 2020, and the Central Consumer Protection Authority came into force on the 24th July 2020. So you may ask what was, why it took so long. But then actually there were too many new things, and it required, legislation and say drafting of rules and regulations. So almost say about 10 rules and regulations have been notified so far. The new provisions which have come into effect are basically consumer protection councils. People are raising hands. Is there anything?
No, ma'am. Continue.
Okay. Shall I continue? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
The new provisions that have been enacted are basically we are now going to go ahead with the simplified disputes redressal process. In mediation has also been introduced. This is basically to ensure that there is no clogging of courts, and it is also a pre-litigation process through which the consumer and the companies can easily mediate, and at a much lesser cost, and with less time spent, it could be addressed. For the first time, product liability cause has also been introduced, and rules for prevention of unfair trade practices, including in e-commerce and direct selling, they have also been introduced. Punishment for fake and misleading advertisements has been introduced, and so also for the celebrity endorsements has also been introduced. So far, we know that there wasn't any such legislative framework in which the fake or misleading advertisements were being tackled. It was largely, as I know, that there were code through which people were kind of regulating. There's also punishment for manufacturing, for sale or storing selling or distribution or importing products containing adulterant or spurious goods. Now, CCPA was also one of the very major steps that we've taken, and the idea is that before the litigation starts, there should be an authority which should actually look into the interests of consumer as a class. And I mean, so far over the past 3 decades, the experience has been that while the department had enacted Consumer Protection Act 1986, it was largely left to the consumer to basically litigate the issue through various, say, district and the state forum. And the government would not step in. More so, the issues which were relating to a major class of consumers. Many times, the consumer would not even know. Many times, the consumer, even if he came to know, would ignore or would accept, because the cost of fighting and the cost of getting speedy justice was so it was basically a deterrent. So in such a case, it was decided that we will have a central consumer protection authority set up, and it will be empowered to basically conduct investigation into violations of consumer rights and institute complaints and prosecution. It can also order recall of unsafe goods and services. It can order discontinuance of unfair trade practices and misleading advertisements. It will also impose penalties on the manufacturers, endorsers, publishers of the misleading advertisements. In this new CP Act, there has also been an attempt to keep in pace with the with the technology that can help in making the judicial process effective. So there has been a simplified dispute resolution process. For example, earlier, the admissibility stage itself used to be so long that it would deter the consumer to approach any court. In the present CP Act 2019, the deemed admissibility has been introduced, wherein if the consumer has, after 21 days of filing, if there is no order, it will be deemed to be admitted. There is also empowerment of consumer commissions to enforce their orders. Now, this is something which is very, very empowering. And this will also help in cutting down the time that consumer commissions used to take. And for the orders to be complied with, the state commission and the district commission can also review their own orders, and appeals will be only on the question of law after the second stage. There is also, we are also trying that CCPA from the very beginning should be on a digital platform as much as possible. So what does it mean? It means that for the consumer, the process of e-filing, getting opportunity for video conferencing for hearing, basically filing from its place of residence or work or wherever it is suitable for him, these things have been introduced. As I said, mediation is something which is absolutely new. And we have to basically also see how it works together in the interest of the consumer. Earlier, what was happening was we kept a safe distance from both the consumer as well as the courts. In this system, there will also be a tier of mediation cells which would be functioning, and it will be basically as an attempt to have an alternate dispute resolution mechanism which would be brought in force and would be ensured that the consumer gets quick decisions, would also get speedy justice to his complaints, and would also ensure that the manufacturers or the retailers, they also are, they are also taken care of in a faster way. So mediation cells will be attached to the consumer commissions, and there'll be a panel of mediators to be selected by the selection committee, which will be consisting of the president and a member of the consumer commission. Mediation will be held in the consumer mediation cell, and what is important is that once people have agreed, then there will not be any appeal against the settlement through the mediation. This new feature of product liability has been introduced, which will basically make sure that the manufacturer or the product service provider or the product seller will be responsible to compensate for any injury or damage which is caused by defective product or deficiency in services. So in this way, we are going to expand the area of the rights of consumers. And that's how we also feel that apart from the fact that consumers are at present, basically the first step to lodge their grievances is the National Consumer Helpline. And we give in some time so that if it is, that is the only method where before stepping into the hardcore litigation area, they can get their grievances redressed. But the CCPA is basically going to take all complaints which consumers are facing individually as well as over a large, say, number of cases. And basically, CCPA would be then working to get justice on behalf of the consumers. So as I said that with the new act in place, we will have these benefits to the consumers, and we are ensuring that the time consuming, the whole litigation which used to take so much of time would be reduced. There'll be swift executive remedies which will be provided through CCPA. There'll be different punishment to check misleading advertisements and adulteration of food and other products. There will be ease of approaching the consumer commissions, and there'll be simplification of adjudication process, early disposal of cases through mediation, and there'll be provision for rules of new age consumer issues, which is largely by the e-commerce and the direct selling entities. And this is the CCPA rules that we will also be having this council, which will be headed by the Honorable Minister, will have about 35 members. And there will be minister in charge from the 2 states of each region. It will be a 3-year term, and provision will be for working groups for specific tasks. And it will basically play advisory roles on important consumer issues. So with this, I think I just introduced the subject to the delegates. And I can only say that while CCPA has been now set up in the IIPA temporarily, and we've already started functioning, but like the building is getting set up, the office is getting set up. We are also creating a digital platform on which complaints directly to the CCPA can be entertained and they can be shared. We are trying to ensure that from the very beginning, it will run like more like a virtual entity. Because of COVID pandemic also, there are restrictions for people to visit and people to, and for us also to call, say, consultative processes with different consumer protection groups and other people. So what we are doing is we are basically trying to have webinars we'll be having one such webinar with all the regulators of food, regulators of, say, telecom and other people. So the whole idea is how these regulators can work in tandem, because eventually the difficulty that is being faced by people in different sectors are largely by the consumers. And there would be, as I said, that while we may not be encouraging the individual complaints to be lodged, we as at the authority would be basically looking at how through different bodies, how an erroneous say decision, or where due diligence is not being taken by those authorities, how consumers stand to lose. And I can say that one such example we took with FSSAI, where we were given, a sample of, we came to learn that there was not a drug, but basically supplement, which was being sold in the market, where the declarations were not readable, So we have taken this matter up because it concerns the entire consumer. It is not expected that each and every time the consumer will approach CCPA and then only, CCPA will basically take action. Idea is that we'll be getting inputs from the National Consumer Helpline. We'll be getting inputs from, say, maybe the voluntary consumer organizations, maybe from, different forum. But at the same time, we will also be looking after the suo motu, say, cognizance in major cases. For this, we are also trying to now set up a process where we will be deploying artificial intelligence tools. There'll be some data digging, and we are in the process of basically trying to see which sectors have basically attracted most complaints, and what are the complaints over the past, say, 3 years that as NCH, we have received through the helpline. And we'll then try to fix up, the repeated nature of complaints that we've received on our helplines from different parts of the country. And whether it makes a pattern, whether it, it's something which is, despite, a few complaints, the organizations have not redressed their processes, and which is something which is causing, harm and, say, injury to the consumer interest. So with this, I think I'll take questions, and maybe the other panelists can also, speak about their
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, at the end of the session, there will be a question and answer sessions reserved for 25 minutes. Now I request Professor Ashokar Patil to introduce another today's chief guest, Mr. Vagish Kumar. Sir, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Vagish. It's my pleasure to introduce Vagish Kumar Singh, who was my student, and now he has developed a lot, and he is practicing at the Supreme Court and High Court. And he is the person, when he was in LLB final year in 2003, when we were working on misleading advertisement, he filed a case against one of the multinational misleading company, cosmetic company, before State Commission, and he fought. So from day one, he is very keen towards consumer protection. It's my pleasure to introduce him here. So he obtained, as I have said, BA LLB honors from National Law School in 2013. And he was awarded with Vice Chancellor's Gold Medal for Outstanding Personal Achievement. He is a co-founder. He co-founded law firm Capstone Legal in the year 2014. He is the president of Capstone Foundation, which is a charitable organization working in the field of technological innovation in education. Vagish has a diverse practice ranging from complex commercial disputes resolution to human rights law. He regularly appearing before Supreme Court of India, various high courts, trial court, and tribunals in India. He has an experience of more than appeared in more than 700 cases, out of which numerous cases have been reported by the court. His firm Capstone Legal was also acknowledged as a rising star by India Business Law Journal, published by Vantage Asia Hong Kong in December 2019. In 2019, Capstone Legal was recognized by Singapore Academy of Law as the only boutique law firm under the category of innovation by law firms in India. A representative set of cases showcasing his diverse area of expertise are some of the areas. It is 4-5 pages his CV runs. I'm summarizing. His area of specialization are, as I have said, consumer protection law, human rights, animal welfare, and other non-government charitable organizations. He represented on behalf of them, and his other areas of expertise: criminal litigation, arbitration, commercial litigation, indirect tax. So, with all these his merits, just I introduce before you all. So I welcome Vagish for the first technical session. So now over to you, Vagish.
Thank you, Professor Patil, for that extremely kind introduction. And thank you, Ms. Khare, for introducing CCPA to all of us. We are very fortunate to have you at the helm of affairs of the very first authority of this kind in the country. Being a practitioner, I would focus on certain aspects, procedural aspects of the authority, because as I see it and as I see the legislation and the manner in which it has been created, what is most evident is that the regulatory nature of the authority is very independent in nature. I say it is independent because its powers of inquiry, investigation, search and seizure, or production of evidence, etc., all these powers are very inherent in it, and it does not have to rely on third parties to carry out all these activities which would otherwise be delegated to other specialized agencies. So, and it is, as you've already stated, it is not merely an advisory body. So in the earlier act, in the 1986 enactment, the consumer councils which existed and which have been continued now in the 2019 act, the councils function as an advisory body, a body which supports and provides advice to the ministry, to the policy makers, and as a think tank. But when I look at the CCPA, and as you have also rightly stated, that the CCPA is a regulator, and it is an aggregator of all the other regulators, and it can bring out the best of all the other regulators to control the entire market space. Now, I would just want to briefly talk about the complaint procedure which is in the Act, because there are several aspects in the complaint procedure which I think as a practitioner and also as a complainant one should be aware of. So the initiation of the jurisdiction of the CCPA is through a complaint, or as you said, through a suo motu initiation. Now, that can be on any of the three jurisdictions. One is violation of consumer rights, of course. Second is unfair trade practices. And third is misleading advertisement. Now, in all of these three, the underlying condition which has been added by the Act, if you see section 17, 19, which provide the complaint procedure, you would find that the definitions provide a very specific term. They provide the rights of consumers as a class. So as you said, simple disputes which are inter se between a consumer and a manufacturer, seller, service provider, etc., would not per se be the jurisdiction of the CCPA. That being said, I am also of the opinion that as you want to also rely on all the helplines for getting into problem sectors and addressing those issues, that is very relevant, because just because a dispute is inter se between a consumer and a final manufacturer or a seller for that matter, it does not mean that it loses significance as a matter which concerns the public at large. Its significance does not decrease in any way. So that's the first step, being initiation, filing of a complaint, and initiation of suo motu or initiation of suo motu proceedings. Now, after that, the important thing to remember is that under Section 19, the Act mandates that there should be a prima facie preliminary inquiry. Now, and it says that the CCPA should make up its mind whether a prima facie case exists that one of the earlier three described jurisdictions have to be invoked. Now, this does not mean a detailed fact-finding exercise, of course. You would not go into detailed pieces of evidence at that stage, but you would just look at the record which is in front of you, or the complaint or the suo motu initiation, and see if it involves a case which requires the efforts and energy of the CCPA. So that is one. But I still believe that at the stage of recording this prima facie case, it should be a semi-spoken order. It should be recorded in writing, because as a practitioner, I'm very well aware, and my colleagues would agree, that the first attack that we would have on the jurisdiction of the CCPA would be on the order which is passed under Section 19, initiating a prima facie inquiry. Now, after a prima facie case is made under Section 19, the Act says that it shall be sent for investigation. Now, the investigation wing has been provided as a separate entity under the CCPA. And if you read Section 19 and 22 together, you see that investigation or the manner of conduct, it is not so very well defined. But if you take paramaterial legislations or legislations where similar prosecutions do take place, for example, GST prosecutions or Central Excise, as it then was, prosecutions under that, or the Customs Act for that matter, then investigation simply means collection of evidence, and collection of evidence in a lawful manner. And we also take guidance from the relevant provisions of the CRPC, wherever it's relevant. So in investigation, the powers of the CCPA, unlike other authorities which are given powers of civil courts, for example, the National Commission of Women is empowered as a civil court for collection of evidence and production of witnesses. But the CCPA does not have that power, but it has powers of collection of evidence. And to further substantiate that, under Section 22, a search and seizure provision is provided. Now, this again is a very, very important provision to understand, and not just understand, but as an authority, I'm sure, to take care at every single step of carrying out the search and seizure. Because the second challenge that I, as a practitioner, or the delinquent persons who would be under scrutiny of the CCPA, the second challenge would be to the search and seizure provisions. Now, why? Why is that? Because search and seizure, the Section 22, it specifically provides that the CRPC's relevant provisions of search and seizure would be applicable. Now, this does not mean that the entire domain of CRPC, wherever it talks about search and seizure, is relevant. But where it talks about the manner of conduct, the general provisions of search and seizure in the CRPC, those are extremely relevant. Now, if you see the general provisions as such, that's the Section 100 onwards, you find that search has to be carried out in a particular manner. While the search is being conducted, the person whose premises is being searched or whose items are being seized, he should be present. He should be made aware that the search is being conducted. There should be independent witnesses signing the panchnama. A panchnama is nothing but a list of whatever is being seized. There should be, if a person is physically searched, then his signature should also be taken. So all these conditions need to be taken care of while exercising jurisdiction in the nature of investigation, and especially in the nature of search and seizure. Because it's slightly confusing for me to address this gathering right now, also because at one end we have the administrator, and on the other hand we have the professionals who I would be advising in the future to challenge certain parts of the proceeding. So I'm trying to make a balance of it, bring a balance to it by making suggestions to both sides, to whoever it suits. Now, in the investigation procedure, right before the order is to be passed, what is very important to note is that the opportunity of hearing, that is principles of natural justice, has been statutorily provided. So an opportunity of hearing has to be granted to the delinquent person or the company, whoever he is. And this opportunity should not be an unrealistic or an artificial opportunity, because that has judicial pronouncements have come down heavily on artificial opportunities of hearing. By artificial, I mean that sufficient opportunity should be given, and it should be well documented and recorded that that opportunity has not been exercised and in what manner. So that is something that I think is important to note, an opportunity of hearing. Now, when it comes to the order which will pass after which will be passed after the complaint goes through all these steps of investigation and inquiry, the order can be of certain specific nature. Now, as my reading suggests, the orders can be either an injunctive order. An injunctive order is nothing but cease and desist, as it is called in the US domain, a cease and desist order, that any unfair trade practice should be ceased. Any sale of goods or supply of services or misleading advertisement should be immediately stopped. Now, the next kind of orders, and I think these are one of the most important orders which the CCPA is authorized to pass, is orders which direct corrective directions. That's corrective orders. Now, corrective orders are orders which not only direct stoppage of sale of a certain kind of goods or stoppage of certain kind of services, but it directs withdrawal of goods from the market. So this is a very, very potent power, that if a good is in the market, not only is its sale prohibited, but whatever has been circulated needs to be immediately withdrawn. So that's the corrective aspect of it. And when it comes to the domain of misleading advertisements, and this has been our experience, my experience, and Professor Patil's experience, that when the CCPA did not exist, and I know it has recently been created, but without a legal domain of advertisements existing in any legal domain, it was very difficult for a consumer or even an entire NGO to stop a particular manufacturer from circulating an advertisement. However, in the corrective nature of orders which the CCP can pass, it's very important to note that the corrective order can not only ask the advertisement to be withdrawn, but it can also ask corrective advertisement to be circulated. Now, this experience has been very, very favorable in the United States of America, where companies, through their own money, have been forced to advertise that our own advertisement was incorrect earlier and we were misleading, which is a heavy, heavy cost on any manufacturer, seller, or distributor. So that is the corrective nature of advertisement. Now, then, of course, the compensatory orders are orders which direct reimbursement or payment of damages. But what is important to note is that the term uses damages to the entire group of persons. So damages not to a single individual, but like a class action suit, as I think the term has been used in the US domain again. Now, we don't have per se class action suits in India. Neither consumer commissions have taken up many matters which include class action suits because of logistical reasons, because of collection of evidence, etc. But the CCPA, within its domain, it can pass an order directing compensation not only to just one individual, but every single individual who has been affected by it, which is, I think, a crippling power. It is a power which, if exercised, can affect the company's entire operations. And of course, the last kind of orders which it can pass is a penal orders, that's directing penalty against misleading advertisements and so on. So if you look at this entire set of nature of orders and the entire procedure which has been prescribed, the manner in which a complaint is to be dealt with, it is very easy to observe that it involves certain very specialized characters of prosecution, very specialized characters of adjudication, though not purely quasi-judicial in nature, and also very hyper-technical aspects of IT or the advertising world and so on. Therefore, and this is a suggestion, and this is something which Professor Bartley and I have also thought about a lot, that the CCPA should comprise of all these experts. And I think the Act also specifically provides in Section 13 for experts to be included within the domain of the CCPA so that all these matters are dealt with properly. However, I go a step further in that and say that when the criminal investigation and the prosecution side of it requires some specialized enforcement agency expert, probably a person having some police services expertise, who would carry out this kind of prosecution. Because if you look at the experience of the GST regime for that matter, numerous GST prosecutions are going to high court jurisdictions and writ jurisdictions and being quashed and set aside because of procedures not being followed at the time of prosecution. And that has a very large ramification on the GST collection aspect of it and the fraudulent aspect of it. The entire prosecution is defeated. So the prosecution, to be completely efficacious, it can have persons, it's a suggestion, it can have persons who have investigation expertise as an investigating officer, either in police services or taxation services and so on. Now, the second thing is, while the order is being passed, the order, and it's an apparent appreciation of evidence that is happening, and not just simplified evidence, but evidence which comprises of a technical expertise and prosecution, panchnamas, and so on. So there might be a need of persons having some judicial expertise or some expertise in law, which might be relevant to the CCPA and the exercise of its powers. Now, another thing I think which is very, very potent is, I'm sorry, what is it? Okay. Another thing which is the power of the CCPA and the manner of its exercise, which has to be very careful and from a practitioner's point of view is very important, is, as ma'am also stated, that e-commerce and the IT industry, they have been changing so swiftly that even advertisements right now, the advertising agency, from simple billboards and television advertisements, has now shifted to a complete online advertising sort of market space, where your Facebook marketing and your Google marketing is the primary marketing which exists, and which is completely beyond the domain of all advertisers, because all private advertising governing bodies, because Facebook and Google do not bow down, so to say, to all the requirements of law in various domains. And Facebook Analytica, the FTC judgment, which has recently been passed in the US, it's a very good example that how privacy rights are are infringed by these behemoths. And therefore, it is perhaps important to some extent that persons having expertise in IT and persons having expertise in e-commerce be made part of the CCPA for its effective carrying out of its business. And a parity can be drawn if a similar situation can be seen in the Competition Commission of India, because recently when they notified their the qualifications required for the director, deputy director, and other directorate roles, the qualifications are all surprisingly and a pleasant surprise. They're all doctorates and specialized degrees in economics, competition law, finance, business administration, and all other fields which are relevant to competition law. So that is something which the CCPA can also take away from similar statutory regulators and quasi-judicial bodies. If I do have some more time, I can dwell into one other aspect also, sir.
Sure, continue.
Yeah. One of the criticisms of establishing a CCPA at the time when it was being discussed, and many industry stakeholders also had this in mind, is that it would interact with the Consumer Commission's domain of operation, and when a consumer commission already exists, what is the need for a CCPA at all? So this overlap was a very major threat to the entire the creation of the CCPA itself. But now the manner in which it has been created and the way in which I and other experts also read the CCPA in the new enactment, to me it appears that the CCPA has now filled in the lacuna or the very minute gaps which were left in the jurisdiction of the Consumer Commission, which is a pleasant surprise for professionals. Because if you look very carefully, the Consumer Commission deals with interstate disputes between a consumer and a service provider or a manufacturer or seller. But for initiation of an inquiry, a consumer needs to first use the product, service, or advertisement, face the consequences, the loss, compute the loss, and quantify it in such a manner so as to get compensation from the Consumer Commissions. Therefore, if you look at it, he has to have a very strong locus standi, and the exercise of that locus standi would involve collection of all these information. Now, but in cases which are specifically of misleading advertisements or goods which are of such low value, as Ms. Khare also talked about, that goods which are of such less value that it does not make financial sense or any sense for a consumer to go to the Consumer Commission at all. In those cases where locus standi is very difficult to establish, this gap is being filled by the CCPA by carefully, as I'm very glad that Ms. Khare wants to closely monitor the consumer helplines and other regulators to understand the market spaces in which the disputes are most in number. So that gap can be very easily filled, and there is no issue of locus standi at all because the CCPA has suo motu power. Now, and another problem which as a practitioner we have constantly felt is information asymmetry. Because I am not aware of, I as a consumer, when I file a complaint for a Consumer Commission, I am not aware of the entire transaction or the entire evidence which the particular manufacturer or seller would have in his possession. I might have an idea, but I would not be absolutely clear. If it is a spurious good, if it is an unfair trade practice, if a warranty is being made, I do not know the scientific evidence behind it. And the Consumer Commission, due to the weak procedural rules that we have, and the CPC also, it's very weak compared to what is in the US, where there's a mandatory exchange of documents, there's a discovery of documents involved. In India, we don't have very clear rules of discovery and exchange of documents or legal holds for that matter. And for that reason, so many matters are defeated because the consumer cannot produce evidence which is sufficient to sustain his claim. So, but in the case of the CCPA, now with all the investigative and the inquiry powers that we just talked about, and not just that, going beyond it with search and seizure powers, all this information asymmetry is set aside, and the CCPA can actively adduce evidence in support of a particular infraction instead of waiting for the party themselves to produce it in court. So that is, I think, another very, very important lacuna which the CCPA now fills in. Also, the manner in which the calculation of injury was being done, that is the manner in which the Consumer Commissions were calculating the compensation to be awarded to consumers. Unfortunately, it was being done in a hyper-technical manner, and it is still being done in a hyper-technical manner where the value of the goods that that are in dispute are also play a very major role. For example, if I purchase a good, this is a live case which is going on right now, which I am dealing with. If I purchase a mobile phone for 70 or 80,000 rupees, even though the mobile phone, if you look at the entire market space of mobile phones, it's an expensive product. A 70, 80,000 rupees mobile phone is an expensive product. But the Consumer Commission would still be reluctant to look at the company and the transaction and the nature of the product as a luxury product, and it would still calculate the compensation on the basis of the price tag, which is the MRP of the product or or the amount which I have paid for the particular mobile phone. So this, what it leads to is that, and also this concept is not new. It is borrowed from all the motor vehicle accident claim tribunal cases that we have, the manner of calculation of injury and how that injury is to be converted into compensation. But unfortunately, the MACT calculation or hyper-technical calculations in consumer commission reduces the potency of the consumer commission. Therefore, the CCPA now, it is not bound by those decisions. It is not bound by that category of whether a price of a good is relevant or not. What is relevant to the CCPA would be the entire effect that that product would have on the entire market space. So I think with that, I would just like to say that the CCPA, the manner in which it has been framed, it has extremely potent powers. And instead of being a reactionary or a adjudicatory body, it is a proactive body. It can be, and it has the potential of being a proactive body. And I sincerely hope that it does remain a proactive body for governing the market space. And thank you very much for being patient with me. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the excellent presentation and elaborating the powers of CCPA and procedural aspects of CCPA. Now we'll move on to the question and answer session. I request Professor Ashokar Patil to take the questions. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Akshay. Many questions we have received. So first of all, my sincere thanks to both Nidhi Khare madam and Vagish for excellent presentation and explanation of CCPA to all. So now there are questions. Just I will ask, and any one of you can take up and explain. So first question is about the endorser liability. How endorsers, what is the endorser responsibility and liability? And what are how the authority will help in this particular situation? So that is the first question. Section 21 discuss about endorser.
Okay.
Yeah.
Basically, let me begin by first of all complimenting Vagish. He was excellent, and I must compliment you on the excellent way in which you have presented. And I think it has basically you have basically spelled out, that it is not just like any other authority. This is going to be an extremely useful authority, which will be basically standing for the consumers, even in cases where you need not expect every consumer to, fight and litigate for their own interests. And I think that is something which is very, very, that is the soul of, the work of CCPA. And so now, it has a huge task on us. In fact, I've been very modest in my, in my presentation, because I also fear that, this is going to, raise the expectations overnight for the people. Because, in our country, there is not one sector which we can say that, okay, consumers get a good deal, So it is something which it is mind-boggling. Actually, as an administrator and as the first chief commissioner here, I find my hands are like completely full, and whatever I do will require, it will have to go through the motions of establishing the credentials of this authority, which means that you have to, you have to really establish it by winning cases for the consumers. And that's how you, as an institution, we will be able to build credibility with the law enforcers, with the jurisprudence, and with other institutions, with other regulatory institutions as well. Now, when you say how are you going to, keep the endorsers in place? So this is something which, all these things require the drafting of, say, standard operating procedures, because it is very easy, for example, so many people say, okay, why doesn't CCPA come out with a big decision? I mean, if I want, I can just take, one ad and, haul up the endorser. But I feel that unless we have, procedures in place, how we are going to go ahead, and we also have a task to advocate, so that the whole idea is not to make a kill for the endorser. The idea is to educate people, to educate what is good and what will be liable for, say, punishment. So we are in the process of actually now drafting the advertisement, the rules, and we are taking help with ASCI, the codes which are already existing. We'll be taking that forward, because now the requirement is whether the endorser had made due diligence while endorsing a product. Now, what due diligence means? This needs to be pronounced very clearly. At least I, as an authority, must know how to go about it. And even for the endorsers, I'm sure, they would also like to know what keeps them out of trouble. So, I mean, at this juncture, this is what we are doing, basically drafting clear rules, so that nobody, not even the authority, should go, beyond its call of duty and, take a wrong step. So, would like to hear from Bagish if he has, what he can offer, because I thought as a young, person, you have the insight, say, you have insights from so many, say, worlds, and including the cases that you filed.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your kind words. And as far as the endorser and the conditions which should govern an endorser are concerned, because there is no guiding principle, and you're absolutely right that those need to be laid down. And in fact, a regulator's first job is to regulate and then enforce. So that regulatory aspect is going on, and we're very glad that it is. But some guidance can be taken, for example, from the provisions of unfair trade practice, where when you talk about warranty and when you talk about guarantees of products, and the burden of proving whether a product is of a particular quality or not, that burden rests upon the person who's claiming that the goods are of a particular quality. So, and they need to be substantiated by scientific evidence. So even for an endorser, a similar, or not the same, but a similar standard, because with the case of an endorser, there's also the question of knowledge. So there might be scientific evidence or might not be, whether he's asked that question or not, and whether that question has been answered and he's been satisfied or not, because his scientific knowledge would be limited and he cannot be assumed to completely know whether whatever evidence is being forwarded to him is of appropriate nature or not. It might be that the scientific evidence is absolutely false. So that balance needs to be drawn, but some guidance can be taken from the unfair trade practices provision, where the burden of proving whether a certain good is of a certain quality or not should be on the person who's claiming it. The endorser, I think the element which is important is the knowledge. If he has knowledge that no scientific evidence exists, then he's clearly liable. He should be clearly liable. But if there exists certain kinds of information, scientific information, which has also been supplied to him, then I think the endorser's liability reduces substantially. I think that's how I would look at it.
Thank you, Vagesh. Lot of questions again on the advertisement industry. One particular question directly to Vagesh. Interaction between consumer laws and advertising industry on social media platforms with its linkage with privacy laws as well. So that is the question directly to Vagesh.
Right, sir. Sir, privacy law is a very confusing domain right now, especially because the manner in which these agents are encroaching upon issues pertaining to our privacy as a common citizens. How the CCPA can deal with it, or how the authority or the act can deal with it, is very similar to what we just discussed about endorsers. The first step is laying down guidelines and regulations to establish a basic parameter which every advertiser, when he's advertising in an online domain, has to follow. And that parameter should be the minimum technical, and it would involve a lot of technical expertise also, because advertising now has come to Instagram advertising, there's Facebook advertising through direct ads, there's Google ads through direct ads, paid advertisements on Google, and information is being thrown at the consumer from all ends. So first of all, the agents need to be identified, the intermediaries need to be identified. Then secondly, the regulations, the basic parameters need to be established, which these online intermediaries need to follow while communicating information. For example, especially because when it comes to advertising of pornographic material, so this is a very lowest hanging fruit, because it's very clear that advertisement of pornographic material should not be allowed, or advertisement of alcoholic or tobacco products, it should not be allowed. But on an online domain, it is happening on a very daily basis, very openly, without any interference. So I see that the existing laws that contain advertisements, especially with regard to pornographic material, alcohol, and tobacco products, or spurious goods, which already exist, magical remedies, for example. But these advertisements, these laws which already exist, which are not being enforced, that is the first step which the CCPA can take against these kind of advertisements. Immediately tell all the intermediaries that no matter what the ultimate consumer, whose privacy, his privacy details show that he's interested in certain kinds of products, who might have probably Googled a particular brand of alcohol, and that is why he's viewing all that information. So that can be governed at the very instance, because laws exist to control it. So that's one thing.
Thank you, Vagesh. One question is, who can file a complaint to CCPA?
Would ma'am want to take it?
Yeah, I think anybody can, anyone. And so that's the beauty is that it does not require you to be a voluntary, organization. It does not require you to be a regulatory authority. It does not require you to be a consumer who is directly affected. It does not require, there are no conditions. So basically, if you are able to say that a certain aspect of transaction of goods or services are basically causing injury to, say, the interest of consumers at large and as a class, it is sufficient. And that is how it also, CCPA also gives itself also this authority, that as, as a suo motu, work, we can simply move ahead.
Okay. Vagish, anything you want to add?
I can just add to it from a practical point of view. For example, when you look at the National Commission for Women, there need not be a complainant who's been affected herself or himself in any manner. If the information comes to them through whatever means, and that's why the complaint section which talks about a complaint, it does not say who's forwarding it. It says if the information is received, the receipt of information is sufficient. So like ma'am said, anybody can file the complaint.
Yeah. I add to this just by my experience. See, as Vagish said, if we want to file a case before the redressal commission, district commission, state commission, national commission, even though you know that it's a spurious or misleading advertisement, just by seeing or without purchasing, I cannot take action against that wrongdoer. Under the Consumer Protection Act 86, I have to purchase it, I have to apply on myself, or I have to suffer, then I get a right to file a complaint before the redressal commission. So that now problem is solved. That we can say that it was a loophole in the 86 Act. Now we can file it when we know that it's a misleading advertisement, prima facie misleading advertisement, because some of the legislation clearly tells that you should not advertise these types of things. Even then, they are advertising because there's no control under those specific legislations, under those regulatory authorities not taking that much serious. That's why they are doing all those types of advertisement. So now, under the new Act 2019, those with proof all those things, we can file a complaint to the CCPA, and on those documents, laws, the CCPA can take action against the wrongdoer. So that is the plus point under the new legislation. Now another question is about only National Commission, CCPA is notified. What about the district commission, district collector, and regional offices are not yet notified? So as on now, if any complaints are there, they have to file directly to the CCPA, or district collector has a power?
So at present, we have not notified, because actually the entire district administration across the country is basically, we all know they are, on the ground facing this COVID pandemic and all that. What I intend to do is to hold, webinars in small batches, so that we make the district collectors aware, and simultaneously also take out notification regarding the duties and the obligations that they as authority would be required to do. Because again, there would be, this is one way in which it is very, very revolutionary, that people need not come to directly to say Delhi, or they should not be completely, there can be regional issues, which in a district or maybe in the state itself, those issues may be very, very important. And that's how it's very important to empower the district collectors also in this, whole thing.
Yeah. Vagish, anything input?
Sir, this is something that I found while reading the provisions, and if you balance them out, you see that when a complaint is forwarded to the district collector, and ma'am has rightly said that they need to be made aware of first that they have this power. So a webinar would make absolute sense. And but when a complaint is forwarded to a district collector, it's slightly unclear as to how that complaint is to be dealt with. Because the Act, if you read section 16, it says the district collector may on a complaint made to him by the may on a complaint or on a reference by the central authority inquire into or investigate complaints regarding violation of rights of the consumer as a class. So it seems to suggest that on receiving a complaint, he can initiate an inquiry under the Act with no role of the CCPA, so as to say, only giving a report to the CCPA once his inquiry is completed. But my suggestion to Madam Commissioner also and to other experts is that the collector should be restricted to conducting an inquiry only when a prima facie case is established by the CCPA themselves. So when a complaint is received, that complaint should be forwarded to the CCPA. The CCPA should then take a prima facie case and then send it back to the collector or the investigating agency to further investigate, because both are investigating agencies in the act. So that's something that just a suggestion.
Yeah. Vagish, in this situation, especially throughout India, every state has around 25 districts. If every district is sending these things, practically, how is it possible for the CCPA to look into all prima facie case and give the suggestion to the district collector? Instead of that, uh, frame a uh, rules under the act and give it to the district collector. These are your responsibilities. Before taking any action, you look into these prima facie issues, then only admit. That's the one point. And another thing, as we know, district collector is having a lot of burden with all
Exactly,
administrative work. So in that situation, leaving completely on district collector as if it will be on paper only, not in
Right.
practical, it is possible. So that's why who can help them? So especially in state, every district is having a district deputy director of a Minister of Consumer Affairs who is heading at the district level on he's officer of Ministry of Food and Civil Supply. So he can take a little bit burden, look into that. And also, as on now, from 1986 till today, one particular chapter is not active under the act, that is the Consumer Protection Councils at the district level, state level, and national level. So
Right.
even states have not established district councils at the district level and even state councils. So if we make it mandatory, especially it is a mandatory, if we motivate and activate the state governments to establish these councils and we make use of their advice or assistance, especially in these types of matters. So this is my concern or opinion. Okay, we'll go to next question. Is there any overlapping powers between Consumer Commission and central authority? I think you touched it. Just you explain a little more.
Should I do it,
Vagish.
sir?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Vagish.
There is, of course, an overlap, sir, because many of the matters which would be referred to the CCPA by persons who either suffered or not suffered would perhaps also be pending before consumer commissions. It cannot be completely ignored, because if a particular good is defective, then it is possible that that inquiry has come before the CCPA, and that inquiry, that adjudication in some obscure matters in some district fora are also undergoing adjudication. So, but for those that's the overlap, which is, I think, which is a little threatening, because it can lead to multiplicity of the outcome. Because if the district forum, for example, in the adjudication process holds that the good is not in fact defective, but the CCPA, while carrying out its inquiry investigation, holds otherwise, then in that case, that is one scenario which I can see where there can be some kind of clash between the two. Otherwise, as I said, they're just filling each other's gaps. But the clash which can perhaps arise is that. So there needs to be there's a very nice database, I think, now of all cases which are pending before the state commissions and national commission and district forums also, most of them. But that particular, if that database has to be very much readily accessible by the CCPS to understand that similar disputes are not pending. And if they are pending, then of course the CCPA has been given the power to intervene in those matters, as it is within its domain to file an intervention in those matters and ask either to the district forum to stay that matter or not take up further proceeding until the final outcome of the inquiry comes out.
Okay. Ma'am,
Just to add, I think, there will be some such, initially, till CCPA finds it feet. There'll be cases where there'll be, say, overlapping between district commissions and or various other commissions and CCPA. But I think, as I said in the very beginning, that we have to basically make sure that we are not doing it for individuals. We will do it only for class action, which means that you do not look at who is suffering or who is going to gain or lose. You are basically supporting the consumer as a class in basically fighting for their rights. So I think once this is established, that CCPA is not out to outperform somebody, or we are not kind of taking away or impinging on the domain of other people, then I think it'll find a reasonable, say, balance, and people will also start looking up to the CCPA for these actions, where it makes very difficult for individual consumers to actually take it up and litigate before district consumers, the commissions. So I think I mean give it will take some time basically to balance and basically to carve out its own place.
Okay. Ma'am, Vagish, another provision is there, section 24, appeal provision. So if a person is aggrieved by the CCPA decision, they can, the CCPA takes a decision under sections 20 and 21. Aggrieved person can file a complaint to the National Commission also. So that little bit suffice if any grievance is there, or any other thing you want to add, Vagish?
No, sir, of course. I was only concerned about, for example, if there is a case which affects a large number of persons. If there are, for example, a set of 100 people are affected by it, it affects common public. Now, that dispute comes into the knowledge of the CCPA. They take suo motu cognizance of it. But out of those 100 people, 2 or 3 who'd had the potential to, if they, for example, file it before the district forum, meanwhile, while the investigation is already undergoing in the CCPA, this kind of thing comes up, sir, because I have several PILs in which the National Commission of Protection of Child Rights took suo motu cognizance, but then the High Court and lower court also filed a criminal FIR and a suo motu PIL. So this kind of clash happens, but it can be reconciled very easily by cooperation, coordination. It can be reconciled.
Okay. About another question that is about the consideration, pecuniary jurisdiction, you touched on that also. So earlier, pecuniary jurisdiction is based on the total claim amount. On that basis, the pecuniary jurisdiction is fixed. But now, in all the district commission, state commission, national commission, it is based on the value of the subject matter. So that's a one thing. And as you said, mental agony, every day they are taking leave, whole day they are spending, even food during the case is going on. All those expenditure, how they can calculate and claim that. And another thing is, there is a clause in all those provisions in the pecuniary jurisdiction, looking into the section 34 jurisdiction of the district commission, section 34. What it says, yes, the not exceed 1 crore and consideration is counted. There is a proviso clause also, provided that where the central government deems it necessary to do, it may prescribe such a other value as it deems fit. Still, central government has a power to look into that particular matter and pass a circular on that.
Right.
Okay. Another question is, can the aggrieved consumer file online complaint to CCPA?
Yes, sure.
Yeah.
He need not appear, and he himself can do it without the help of any lawyer.
Okay. Right. Now we are 5:25. So it's a great discussion. My sincere thanks to Vagish and Nidhi madam. Akshay, over to Akshay.
Because of scarcity, we couldn't take a few cases. There are n number of questions, but now we are moved to the vote of thanks sessions. So it's my honor and privilege to extend vote of thanks on behalf of Chair on Consumer Law and Practice, National Law School of India University. I would like to thank today's guest speaker, Ms. Nidhi Khare, Chief Commissioner, Central Consumer Protection Authority, and Additional Secretary, Ministry of Consumer Affairs, Food and Public Distribution, Government of India, New Delhi, and Mr. Vagish Kumar Singh, alumni of NLSIO, and Advocate, Supreme Court of India, for taking his precious time out and consenting to be the guest speaker of technical session 1. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. I also thank all the participants who have taken out their valuable time to attend this webinar series. Thank you, everyone. I would also like to thank our beloved Professor Dr. Ashoka Patil, who always support us in all the activities with kind heart. Thank you, sir. Last, I once again thank you all. With this, I conclude the technical session 1 of National Webinar Series on Consumer Protection Act 2019 Rules and Regulations. Kindly join us for technical session 2 tomorrow sharply by 3:30 p.m. Thank you one and all. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you,
So
Vagish.
much.
Thank you very much,
It was
ma'am.
pleasure and really good to hear Vagish, and also
Likewise.
good to also receive so many questions and queries. I've been reading the chat sessions also, and in that a lot of questions are being raised, and I have taken a note of many things which I need to do very urgently. So I'll be taking help, Vagish. I mean, if you're there.
Anytime.
And Professor Patil,
Sure,
I'm
ma'am.
sure we'll be very quickly be turning onto the product liability rules and regulations. So there is much to be done actually, and the authority has to be established. So I think it was, for me also, it's a very, very informative session, and I keep looking to suggestions that will only strengthen the authority. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Grateful.
Thank
Thank you, sir.
you, Vagish.